The day I boarded my private jet, I wasn't thinking of anything out of the ordinary, just a routine of another business day. Flying was commonplace for me. At the helm of my airline empire, I was constantly in motion, from one meeting to the next, coast to coast. Luxury was woven into every inch of this aircraft, from the gold accents and plush leather seats to the whisper-quiet, attentive staff. This was my world, my creation, and it was always meant to be a sanctuary, a place where I felt at ease and secure. As I stepped onto the plane, I noticed Lauren, the lead flight attendant for that day. Her uniform was impeccable, not a hair out of place, and her demeanor was sharp and professional. But the moment our eyes met, I felt a chill, a distinct iciness. While she greeted other passengers with practiced, warm smiles, she offered me a curt nod and a cold, "Welcome aboard." Perhaps it was just my perception, but it felt as though she thought I somehow didn't belong there. I settled into my seat, dressed in my custom-tailored navy blazer and slacks, projecting the image of someone simply there to conduct business, without seeking attention. I never seek attention. I'd learned long ago that power often resides in understatement. I gazed out the window, watching the sun glint off the sleek exterior of the jet. I took a deep breath, trying to shed the weight of the day's meetings and decisions. Lauren began to move through the cabin, ensuring everything was in place. When she approached the Raymonds, a couple in their 60s, her smile broadened, becoming almost exaggeratedly bright. She greeted them warmly. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. So lovely to have you with us again." The contrast between her genuine warmth towards them and her cool indifference towards me was impossible to ignore. Without raising an eyebrow, I simply observed, making mental notes. After the Raymonds were settled, Lauren approached me. Her eyes lingered on my handbag, tucked neatly under the seat as if it were out of place. She didn't say a word, just passed by, offering neither a smile nor any gesture of courtesy. A faint unease flickered within me, but I tried to dismiss it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was having a bad day, but my instincts were telling me something else. A few minutes later, Lauren came back towards me. The click of her heels against the polished floor amplified my growing tension. Her smile was still present, but this time it carried a distinctly condescending edge. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice polite but dripping with disdain. "I believe you're in the wrong section." I looked up, my gaze meeting hers directly. "I don't think so," I replied calmly. "This is my seat." Her smile faltered, her voice sharpened. "I don't believe so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers." I noticed that we had begun to attract the attention of the other passengers. A nosy socialite seated nearby leaned forward, craning her neck for a better view. A businessman across the aisle raised an eyebrow, frowning at Lauren's tone. But I remained composed, my eyes fixed on Lauren. "You might want to double-check the passenger list," I suggested, my voice calm but firm. Before making assumptions, her eyes widened in disbelief, her condescension morphing into irritation. I don't need to check anything," she snapped. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." Whispers began to ripple through the cabin. "Why doesn't she just move?" murmured one passenger. "Probably trying to sneak in for a free upgrade," shrugged another. Lauren seemed to overhear these comments, nodding slightly as if in agreement. She crossed her arms, raising her voice. "If you don't move to the back of the plane, I'll have to call security." I tilted my head slightly, my expression unwavering. "Call whoever you need to," I said softly, but my words carried more weight than Lauren seemed to anticipate. The tension in the cabin thickened. Lauren turned to Grace, a younger flight attendant who was standing nearby, her face pale and eyes filled with apprehension. "Grace," Lauren barked, her tone harsh. "Escort her to the back." Grace hesitated, her eyes flickering between me and Lauren. She wanted to speak up, to suggest checking the passenger list, just as I had. But the venomous glare Lauren shot her silenced her. With a reluctant nod, Grace took a step towards me. Still seated, calm and collected, I shifted slightly in my seat. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," I said quietly, my words carrying a subtle but potent warning. Lauren scoffed, dismissing my words with a wave of her hand. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she retorted, gesturing for me to stand. "Now get up." As the passengers watched, the tension in the air became almost palpable. I remained seated, my gaze unwavering. "I'm not moving," I stated simply. The socialite, with her perfectly coiffed hair and obvious air of entitlement, leaned towards her companion, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. "Looks like she's trying to sneak in for a free ride." Lauren latched onto this comment, nodding as if she had found validation. Addressing the other passengers, she announced, "That's exactly what it looks like. We have rules for a reason. Some people just don't respect them." I didn't respond to the whispers or the insults. Instead, my gaze remained steady on Lauren. My silent defiance was a more powerful statement than any words could have been. As the tension mounted, Grace hesitated, moving towards the passenger manifest clipped near the cockpit door. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the names, hoping for something that might help me. But before she could speak, Lauren's voice sliced through the air. "Grace, what are you doing?" she snapped, her tone sharp. "I was just checking," Grace murmured, barely above a whisper. Lauren cut her off with a curt command. "I've got this under control. You don't need to get involved." Grace retreated, her face flushed with embarrassment. She bit her lip, torn between doing the right thing and the fear of losing her job. Just as the scene reached its boiling point, a calm, kind-looking businessman seated across the aisle leaned forward, his expression a blend of concern and curiosity. He smiled at me. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice warm. "Is everything all right?" I turned towards the businessman, my expression softening as I acknowledged his quiet gesture of support. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, my voice steady but touched with gratitude for his small act of kindness. Before the businessman could speak further, Lauren's voice sliced through the air, sharp and accusatory. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage this disturbance," she snapped, her eyes narrowing as she turned back to me. Pointing a finger at me, she added, "You're causing a scene." The businessman, who had been quietly observing, frowned at Lauren's tone. "From where I'm sitting," he said in a calm, measured voice, "you're the one making a scene." Lauren's face flushed with anger, her composure unraveling. She turned her attention back to me, her voice trembling with fury. "I've had enough of this," she hissed, stepping closer. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane." I met her gaze without flinching. "You can try," I said softly, my words dripping with quiet defiance. Lauren's frustration boiled over, her voice shaking as she leaned in closer, practically spitting the words at me. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong?" I said nothing, my silence only fueling Lauren's rage. After a moment of tense stillness, Lauren finally turned away, her anger still simmering. She moved down the aisle to carry out her other duties, her polished shoes clicking briskly against the carpet, a staccato rhythm that matched her mounting frustration. She walked with purpose, her expression tight, her eyes darting back towards me as though daring me to challenge her again. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in my seat, my attention focused on the book in my hands. My calm presence was a stark contrast to the tension around me. The passengers spoke in hushed tones, chatting softly, but the air was thick with discomfort. I had been waiting patiently for a drink, watching as Lauren served Mr. and Mrs. Raymond first, moving towards the rear of the plane without so much as acknowledging me. As the tray grew lighter, I spoke, my tone gentle and polite. "Excuse me," I said, "could I have some water, please?" Lauren paused, glancing at me with a dismissive look that spoke volumes. "I'll get to you when I can," she said curtly, walking past without a second glance. My calm gaze followed Lauren's retreating figure, but I remained silent. I wasn't going to engage in petty back and forth, but the disregard, the hostility, was beginning to build. Minutes passed, and I shifted slightly in my seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. I stretched one leg slightly into the aisle, a subtle, unassuming movement. But Lauren, who had returned with her tray in hand, saw this and immediately changed her path. Instead of walking around me, she deliberately moved closer. In a split second, Lauren's foot struck my leg. The tray of water tilted, sending the glasses crashing to the floor and splashing across my lap. Lauren gasped theatrically, her voice sharp and loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Watch where you're putting your legs," she snapped. "You've caused a mess." The passengers turned, startled by the sudden commotion. I looked up, my expression momentarily startled but quickly composed. I calmly brushed at the water on my trousers and replied, "But you walked into my leg." My tone remained even, and with a slight tilt of my head, I added, "I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else, and if that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air, a quiet but powerful rebuke that seemed to momentarily stun the entire cabin. Lauren's face flushed bright red with anger, and she stepped closer, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" Lauren hissed, her voice sharp and filled with venom. But the next moment, something shocking occurred. Unable to contain her fury any longer, Lauren raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin, sharp and shocking, as though a thunderclap had erupted in the air. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman, who had been a silent witness until now, stood halfway, his face a mix of disbelief and fury. Grace, the junior flight attendant, flew her hands to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Even the nosy socialite, who had been the first to pass judgment on me, now appeared visibly taken aback, her earlier smirk replaced by a look of unease. I slowly straightened in my seat, my hand resting calmly on my lap. My expression remained unchanged, my gaze steady and unwavering as I looked up at Lauren. The silence in the cabin was deafening, the air thick with tension. For the first time, Lauren hesitated. My voice, calm but filled with quiet authority, sliced through the stillness. "You just made the worst mistake of your life." The words hit Lauren like a shockwave, and for a moment, her confidence faltered. The realization that I was not the person she had presumed me to be seemed to finally sink in. I didn't flinch or touch my face. I didn't raise my voice. I simply sat there, my eyes holding an unspoken power that made Lauren hesitate, something I had done without even trying. I straightened my posture, my words deliberate and firm. "I've been patient with you," I said quietly, my voice calm but cutting. "But your behavior has crossed the line." Lauren's jaw clenched, her expression darkened, and her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Crossed the line?" she snarled, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been disruptive since you got on this plane." My gaze didn't waver, my demeanor still unshaken by Lauren's venomous outburst. I addressed the passengers, ensuring them that such behavior would not be tolerated, and that all future passengers would be treated with dignity and respect. As the plane landed, my assistants were waiting, and I was immediately briefed about my next meeting. I recognized the young flight attendant Grace, who had quietly supported me, and promised her a promotion. The situation became a turning point. My firm leadership set a new standard for my airline. The incident quickly went viral, with my actions widely praised on social media for my grace, authority, and commitment to respect. In a subsequent interview, I shared my message. Respect is a right, not a privilege, and true leadership is about upholding dignity for all, regardless of assumptions. Later, I boarded another flight where the atmosphere had palpably changed. The crew greeted me warmly, showing that my influence had permeated the airline. My actions had not only resolved the conflict on the plane, but sparked a wider conversation about respect, leadership, and equality. I implemented new policies to ensure all passengers were treated respectfully, no matter their background. My leadership inspired others to reflect on their actions and biases, with hashtags like respect above all, and hashtag Naomi's Vision trending on social media. As I continue my journey, I reflect on how standing up for myself led to a broader cultural shift, both within my airline and in society. My vision is clear. Success is defined by how people are treated, not by wealth or status. Naomi Williams' journey of leadership and respect has only just begun. And as for Lauren, she was escorted off the plane in handcuffs. Her career with my airline, and perhaps any airline, over before it truly took off. It was a necessary action, not just for me, but for the integrity of my company and the message I wanted to send. Disrespect and discrimination would not be tolerated, not on my planes and not on my watch.